A reading from the Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Give me my share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered all the property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. He would have gladly filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arm around him and kissed him. Then his son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. When he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a servant for you, and I never disobeyed your command. But you had never given me even a young goat, so I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord. The spirit of capitalism and the Protestant work ethic prize working hard seemingly above all else. There are numerous stories about what can be achieved and what can be attained through hard work, especially in the most exceptional of cases. And while I became acquainted with this hard work ethic growing up, especially towards school, clearing the dishes and loading the dishwasher, not so much. Each time I return to the story of the prodigal son, I become aware, as if for the first time, that this hard work ethic can blind us to the people around us and move us in the opposite direction of grace. I can recall one of the last family reunions I went to in South Carolina, where my grandparents were still alive, and realizing after a lifetime of work, my grandparents were broke, dawning on me. Between the lines that my mom was helping out to make all this happen. And I looked around at the fellowship hall that had been rented at the home. What good is all the money in the world if you don't have people to laugh with, to celebrate with you, and to cry with you as you approach your dying days? A few years later, Heidi and I would sit with my grandmother in the fellowship hall at Park Circle. My grandparents had been married in that very fellowship hall as it was built before the sanctuary. And my parents and aunts and uncles had been married in the space we just left, the sanctuary, for my grandfather's funeral. I ended up having to make up nearly 40 hours of my chaplaincy residency that summer due to going to my grandfather's funeral. And I missed the first Palm Sunday after I was ordained because my father-in-law died unexpectedly the week before. So Heidi and I were in Ohio for the funeral and burial. The death of loved ones in our lives can bring about questions of meaning and searching. As we move out of our presently pandemic-influenced time in our world, I am deeply aware that you have worked hard, and I'm aware that we have spent much time apart. I am deeply aware that it's easier to sit at home and judge the choices other people make in their lives. And I wonder if we've become so sucked in to the myth and storytelling of hard work and grinding away that we miss the joy of being together and finding reasons to celebrate. Over the past few years, each time we gathered for worship with a few more people present, it made my heart sing. While there was a time where I learned how to preach seated in front of a Zoom in my office chair, it was certainly much more gratifying to be in a sanctuary with people. I wonder, have we lost our ability to celebrate? Have we become blind to the joy that we can find in every day and that we do not need to endlessly save up more? This week in Bible study, it was pointed out to me the overwhelming joy it is to realize that we can contribute to help feed our neighbors through our food bank. And that in doing so, it's a reminder of how much all of us have that we can share and help feed another person. And for those of us who are unable to pack bags or lift them, to be part of a congregation that is overflowing with people who are more than up to the task. The blindness of the hardworking old brother takes the form of not resting and refusing to enter the celebration. The hard work hasn't just made him dull, it seems to have hardened his heart. Perhaps the older brother could only see the work that will still be done, and in doing so, in his mind justifies his stance in opposition, even as the resistance is to joy and celebration, is a form of self-sabotage. The thoughts must be bubbling up in the older son. Perhaps they're familiar to some of you. How can I experience joy when others can't? What gives me the right to joy when the world groans and cries out? How can I celebrate when people are fighting somewhere and dying for freedom? How can we stop and find joy when all the check marks on the list are not filled in? And clearly, the people who are stopping to celebrate, they just don't see. They don't understand, the older son seems to think, all the work that's still to be completed. How can there be joy, pleasure, delight in this life until all the boxes are checked off? In these moments, we need God's grace most in our lives. Here, grace is more than forgiveness. Grace is more than saying we are enough. Grace comes to our lives to remove the barriers and walls we put up, walks us into the banquet, plops us down in the chair, even when, especially when, it feels like joy and celebration are the last thing we should be doing. Grace comes to remove the should from our lives, the should from our self-talk, the should from the way we treat and judge other people. Stand next to the older song long enough, and it will train your eyes to only see all the unmarked boxes on the to-do list. Tunnel vision that can block out anything and everything that isn't on the checklist. I've never hosted a celebration where we roasted a fatted calf or a whole hog or anything of the sort. Heidi and I started out in our first year of our married life hosting spaghetti dinners when we were in a small apartment. At one time, I'm pretty sure we had over 20 people over for dinner at the same time. It wasn't about the food or because we were overflowing in spaghetti. Rather, the joy found us in inviting people to celebrate the goodness of life and friendship and to be present together. All our work from our jobs and from graduate school and seminary wasn't complete when people showed up at our apartment. And that was okay. Because our lives need grace and joy and time to celebrate. We have lived through a time together where people have had plenty of good reasons, really good reasons, to keep apart, and in some instances even postpone celebrations. And when we worship God who rejoices people coming back together and discovering joy again. For the gospel this day begs the question of us, in the midst of all the hard work of our lives, why, God, is it hard to choose joy and join in the celebration? Even when the older son is invited to the party, he seems resistant because it's not the party, not the reason he would choose for celebration. But therein reveals the mystery and the secret. You don't need a reason. You can invite people into your life and share a meal together for no other reason than it's Tuesday and the second cheese pizza is only $5. So why not grab some paper plates and some paper towels and see who would rather talk and laugh than cook dinner by themselves on a Tuesday night at home? After all, what kind of prize is it to cook dinner each and every Tuesday night? And if you love making dinner on Tuesday nights, please see me after the worship because I could use some new meal suggestions. Seriously, this week or this month, give it a try. Invite some people over for a meal. Use paper plates and paper towels if you need to. This isn't about deserved or hard work. It isn't about judging what we perceive someone else has squandered. This is waking up and realizing that we live in the land of promise, and the manna from the wilderness is no longer coming down because we are not in the desert. And from the land comes the fruits of the earth, and these fruits are worth sharing, and these fruits taste better when they're shared. We don't need bigger barns to store up more for ourselves and our households. We need more sharing, more joy, more grace for ourselves and the people around us. Let us not toil so long next to the older son that we cannot say yes to joy and celebration in our lives. Amen.